Hi, and welcome to Season 2 of the Team Deakins Podcast, a collection of informal conversations between Roger and James Deakins and a guest. We never know where the conversation will take us, so listen in and see where it goes. This episode is sponsored by Aperture and its new Storm XT52, the industry's most powerful LED point source light. Brighter than a 6K HMI and powered by Aperture's revolutionary Blair light engine, the Storm XT52 is both a tunable white light and also the brightest ever adjustable color LED. Storm XT52, unrivaled output, only from Aperture. Today we're speaking with a director. His credits include Shaun of the Dead, Baby Driver, and Last Night in Soho. We're pleased to welcome Edgar Wright. Edgar, thank you for doing this.
Yes, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
We'd love to ask you our first question, which is, how did you get to where you are today? Is this something you always wanted to do? Did you follow another path, or were you shooting movies since a kid?
Yeah.
What's your story?
You grew up in Wales, in Somerset, right?
That's right.
Which is kind of not
Far from Hollywood.
Not so far from where I grew up, in Torquay in South Devon, actually. So, yeah, how did you get from there to Hollywood?
I actually, even before I was in Somerset, until I was 7, I lived in Swanage in Dorset. So I kind of
Oh, wow, love Swanage.
Wow.
two different counties that border Devon.
Yeah.
So definitely from the southwest. Yeah, I mean, I had, I guess my parents, who were both artists and art teachers, had got me and my brother interested in film. And so we were always, from a young age, really fascinated with cinema, but not necessarily with any idea of how to get into it until maybe we were in our teens, that my parents bought me and my brother like a joint Christmas and birthday present of like a secondhand Super 8 camera. So once we had that, we started experimenting. And also, as you both well know, like not an inexpensive hobby in that those Super 8 cartridges were not cheap. So
Yeah.
Right.
so kind of like, I think probably in the mid to late 80s when I started doing it, those cartridges would be like £30 a go. Like if you think about that, you
Right.
could record hours and hours on your iPhone now, but back then you'd have like, 3 minutes basically. But me and my brother started making things on Super 8, and I guess that just turned into making amateur films really in Somerset and Wales. First making like little comedy shorts and then little bits of animation. And then I actually won a video camera on the BBC. Like when I was 16, There was a comic relief competition where you had to make a kind of film about one of their causes. And I made an animation film, and the prize was a video camera, which I wouldn't have otherwise been able to afford. But once I had the video camera, I was probably like about 16, 17. And once I had the video camera, then it really kind of turned into sort of like a full-time obsession, because then suddenly I was going from making like these little 5-minute Super 8 shorts to making things that were like 45 minutes long, an hour long, making, just making amateur films with my friends at school. And so that's really how I got my start. I went to art college for 2 years at Bournemouth, back on the South Coast again. And that was really sort of my entry into it. I guess I was sort of obsessed with, I didn't have any links in the industry whatsoever and didn't really know how to break through. But I guess around that time, this is in that sort of pre-internet age, you can only rely on the books in the library and magazines and whatever might be or might not be on the TV. And definitely like hearing about other filmmakers who'd broken through in a very low budget, independent way. People like Sam Raimi or Robert Rodriguez or Peter Jackson. They were all around the time that I was really kind of getting serious about it. And their stories of breaking into the industry completely outside of Hollywood were really inspirational to me. So I was really sort of trying to look at how to do that myself. And it all culminated in me making a very, very low budget film when I was like 20. After 2 years at art college, I raised money like through a local businessman, basically raised £11,000 to make an entire feature film on 16 mil. So that was how I got my break. Basically, is I made a like an extremely low budget film, a Western spoof no less, on an 11 grand shooting budget.
Wow. But you also did some television when you were starting out, right? I mean, how did you get into that?
Well, one thing led to another. So I was still in Somerset. I made the movie. I moved to London to edit the movie, and it was all extremely low budget. I actually edited kind of on film in London, but we were sort of, I guess, illegally using an, I wouldn't even call it an edit suite at Pinewood. We were sort of editing in a broom cupboard, basically. I think we were basically there, like a producer on the movie had worked in the post-production department, and he basically found a room which nobody would really kind of like question why we were there, and we were just quietly editing the movie. And when I think about it now, it was kind of we probably shouldn't have been there at all, but we had I had an editor that I'd been at art college with, but then I became the assistant editor because there was nobody else and there was no money. And when we finished the film, which was like 1995, it screened at the Prince Charles. A distributor called Blue Dolphin opened it in London on the Prince Charles in Leicester Square, and it was called A Fistful of Fingers, and it got reviewed like by the papers and the magazines, even though there was only one print and it was only really in one cinema. It opened the same weekend as GoldenEye, the Bond film, and so I remember vividly. It was like the late November, and I remember vividly being outside the Prince Charles, and I was doing a couple of Q&As on opening weekend. I was 21, and I was on the dole, and I could sort of afford my travel card to get into London, and that was about it. I definitely couldn't afford dinner. And I remember vividly looking at the long, long, long queue outside the Odeon Leicester Square of people getting into GoldenEye. I felt very Dickensian. I was super skinny, and I hadn't got the money to kind of eat anything, but I was doing these Q&As. So it was a funny thing, and I think people don't really realize this about film, is I think that people assume that if you're in any way related to a film coming out, that you must be loaded. And of course, the reality is,
yeah, right.
especially in the independent world, it's like far from it. And so to answer your question, the TV, I basically some people came to see the film, and two of them were like the comedians, Matt Lucas and David Walliams, who both saw the film at the Prince Charles. And they were just starting to do a very early TV sketch show on the Paramount Comedy Channel, which was in Rathbone Place. And they needed a director, and they suggested me. And so at age 21, I got my first TV directing gig, which is crazy. I mean, and I wasn't really properly trained. I hadn't really been to film school. I'd done art college, but I was basically learning on the job. It was kind of wild in a way. I think I realized it then that it was kind of highly unusual that I was directing without any formal training. And that's how I started in TV. It's crazy.
Wow. And had you studied movies beforehand to see what cutting did? And had you approached movies that way and then tried to put it into the movie that you cut?
Yeah, very much so. You mean I would just study movies. I guess when I was in my late teens, we got a VHS in the house, a VCR. Then I would really start just picking films apart, really starting to analyze how things were made, how they were edited, how certain camera shots were done. But obviously, you can watch a film and understand what maybe the different rigs are, but you don't have access to them. So then you're trying to find your low budget way of doing them. whether it be like how to do dolly shots without a dolly or how to do Steadicam shots without a Steadicam. When I was making amateur films, I made this it was like a little video cam, like a little mini cam. And I made this sort of, I wouldn't even call it a Steadicam Junior. It was like basically like a ceiling tile with like a cat's cradle. So I could kind of do like low angle shots of people's feet and run after them. So I think that's the thing, is I kind of learned by just kind of looking at films that I loved and trying to copy them. In fact, one of them, Roger, was, you didn't shoot this one, but obviously one of your major collaborators. But a big film for me in that regard was Raising Arizona, where I would watch the Coen brothers film and really try and pick it apart of why it looked like that and how they did it and how they achieved these effects. And that would be one of many films that I would be really obsessed about and trying to figure out how it was done. But again, this is just done by sight alone. It's not like and again, like in a pre-internet age where, in Wells, Somerset, it's not like they had a big film section in the library. You'd sort of just have to rely on the film magazines out there like Sight and Sound and Empire. And that was kind of about it at that time,
Seems like your films have got a very deliberate style. I wondered if when you started off making your own films on Super 8, that influenced the way you looked at creating shots, because you didn't obviously have you couldn't just keep the camera running. You had to decide
what you were going to shoot.
I imagine what you were going to shoot, as it was quite expensive.
Yeah, I definitely, when I was doing the Super 8 stuff, I would sort of edit in camera, or certainly I became aware very quickly of how much coverage you needed to make something work. And actually, when I did the low budget film, the Western spoof, I think we had like a 2-to-1 ratio or something like that. It was something, maybe it was like 3-to-1, if that. So that was a real harsh learning curve, because when I got into the edit of that film, I basically didn't really have enough coverage to cut it together as fast and as sharp as I wanted it to be. And I think that has had an ongoing impact on everything I've done since, is that you have to make sure you have enough footage to edit it and to be able to pace something. You can't really pace something unless you have the coverage. Obviously, a lot of people, in a French New Wave way, you could go into sort of jump cuts and kind of like make something look stylish in a different way. But I would, after that experience of doing my first film and not really having enough coverage, I think everything after that, I would really design the way I was going to shoot, so I had enough to get into the edit. So I used to edit myself as well. So I would definitely have a big awareness of how things were cut together and why things. And again, just by analyzing other films. But it's definitely something that I think with younger filmmakers, I'm always telling them that you have to like shoot with the edit in mind, and you have to think about how things are going to cut together, and making sure that you're at minimum like covered for that, so that you don't. I think maybe sometimes when people make their first film or make their first short, they get into the editing room and then have a real rude awakening of the scene just doesn't work because the shots that they've designed in their head don't really cut together. And I've definitely been through that kind of process, so that then once I started to kind of do things that I was happier with, like with some of the TV work that I was doing, especially the show Spaced that I did on Channel 4 with Simon Pegg and Jessica Hines and Nick Frost, like I was really like making that show with the edit in mind.
That was interesting. That's the first time you teamed up with those Simon and Nick. What brought you together so well? It led to Shaun of the Dead, right? I mean,
yeah, we had already done another show, me and Simon and Jessica, who co-wrote and co-created Spaced. We'd already done another show on the Paramount Comedy Channel where they had acted in and I was directing. And Spaced, which was a Channel 4 sitcom, came out of that. And they were very, gracious to kind of include me early on, as like they wanted me to be the director. So the crazy thing, and in between that, in the interim, I'd actually done a lot of stuff at the BBC, again, when I was in my early 20s. So I had this period from about like 97 to maybe like 97 and 1998, I was directing shows at the BBC. I did a French and Saunders Christmas special. I did an episode of
All right.
Murder Most
Yeah.
Horrid. I did a whole series of Alexi Sale, a whole series of Bill Bailey. And that again was like sort of just a steep learning curve because now I'm like 23, 24, and I'm working at the BBC and working with like crews who have all done that training. And, I got on with some of them, and I think some of them really resented me because they didn't know who this kid was. Who were like, and when they found out I wasn't anybody's son, it seemed to make them even madder. I think they would have appreciated the nepotism answer more than when they realized that I wasn't the director general's son. They were like, "Who the fuck is this kid?"
Where's he come from?
Where's he come from? But then I did Spaced, and the nice thing about that, not that the BBC experience was bad, it was actually a fantastic experience. And so much learning on the job. I mean, crazy to be doing these big shows and actually still sort of like learning on the job, essentially.
But can I just butt in that? How much freedom did you have on those shows? I mean, your work is known to be, quite free and it feels spontaneous, and it's very adventurous. So I'm wondering,
which is not what you think of when you think of the BBC.
Not when you think of doing a special on the BBC. But
it was funny, actually. I think actually in two cases with Bill Bailey, I did a show for BBC Scotland. That was totally fine because it was his first TV show as well. Alexi Sale was his sketch shows that he did on the BBC were pretty avant-garde, and he was just just fine to kind of let me do whatever, and actually was that was great because he actually sort of said, he wanted it to be stylish and different and didn't really question the way I was shooting it particularly. He was kind of interested. Same thing with Dawn French on Murder Most Horrid. She sort of understood that I was sort of doing it in a different way. I guess when I did the French and Saunders special, that was a bit different because there was certainly a way of doing things at BBC Comedy. And I think because I do remember once the producer of that show, I'd done one take of, there was a sketch that was with Jennifer and Dawn and Helen Mirren. And we did a take of it with maybe like 2 cameras running. And I wanted to do a second take. And the producer, I'll say who it was because we've talked about this. It's John Plowman. He came up to me after the first take and he says, "Why are we doing a second take?" And I said, I think I can get the shots better. And he said something to the extent of like, "They were great. Why weren't you?"
Oh my God.
And it was so, there's stuff like that. And in a way, I understand it from his point of view in terms of like, and this is something when you're working with comedy performers, I'm sure you've had this experience. There are people who kind of like, they are going to be great on the first take, and you have to be ready. You have to be ready for that. And obviously, actors generally, comedic or not, some people are like, the first couple of takes are the best. Other actors, might take 3 or more, or like warm into it. And most of your
a dozen,
like as a director, you kind of start, especially when you're doing ensemble stuff, you have to strategize about what order you're going to shoot people in, depending on whether you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle or whether you're warming up to get something perfect. So actually doing those BBC comedy shows, working with French and Saunders, and actually sort of, you've got all these amazing performers in the room and you've just got to cover it in a way that you get it, like pretty much first take or second take. Then when I did Spaced on Channel 4 with Simon and Jessica and Nick Frost, a younger cast, or rather a cast of a similar age to me, mostly like a younger team, and more, I guess they were more up for experimenting, and it was easier to be more stylish in a way. So that was really, I did 2 series of that for Channel 4. And then me and Simon had started sort of hatching plans to write a film, which eventually became Shaun of the Dead. But it came out of that process of making that show and having our sort of way of working. There was a little bit different to maybe the BBC method. And to be honest, again, to go back to things that I was inspired by in film, where, like directors that would be able to shoot comedy and make it stylish. And obviously, like Joel and Ethan, or like Sam Raimi, or later like Wes Anderson, or people who could shoot comedy but could have some kind of like just idiosyncratic style to it, or just, that it wasn't just shooting some actors and just covering them. It was more than that. And that was really what this show I did on Channel 4 was. And that was the ambition with Shaun of the Dead, is like, let's make a low budget movie, but let's try and make it really stylish and slick.
And each episode of Spaced was like a homage to a kind of particular film genre, wasn't it? And so Shaun of the Dead was kind of like an homage to, George Romero, I guess, or something.
It was almost designed to be, like Spaced. Sort of, I guess the thing in Spaced is it's like magical realism, in the sense that the characters were, kind of slackers on the couch, but they're consuming a lot of media, TV and film and video games, and they're living their lives as if they're in those films and video games. And I guess the thing with Shaun of the Dead was taking it a stage further, where what we really wanted to do was we loved the George Romero zombie films. And what we thought is, well, what if you did like a story that's like adjacent to the main story? So we always had this like pitch that if Dawn of the Dead was Hamlet, then Shaun of the Dead should be like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. Like, it's about the other guy. It's about the other guys. It's about the bit players. What about these two guys on the fringes? And actually, weirdly, one of the other inspirations for like Shaun of the Dead, aside from George Romero, would be somebody like Mike Leigh. Is that how could you couple that naturalism, that naturalism in comedy and in the sort of performance style and the realism of it with a genre film? And so that was really like one of the big inspirations. And I remember when we had our first, before we went, it was with Working Title. It was originally developed with Film 4. And I do remember saying in a meeting, it was with Jim Wilson and Paul Webster, when Paul was the head of Film 4 and Jim was a producer there. I remember saying something like, "It's life is sweet with zombies."
Did you ever talk to Mike Leigh about that?
You know what? It's funny you say that, because I'm always kind of slightly terrified by Mike Leigh, because I'm such a big fan and I never want to say something dumb in front of him. And I remember he's always super nice to me. But then I remember when we were nominated for the BAFTA for Shaun of the Dead, I think it was around the same time that maybe Vera Drake was nominated. And he said congratulations, because we'd been nominated for Best British Film. And I said, "Oh, that means a lot to me." And I told him this story. And immediately, as soon as it was coming out of my mouth, it felt dumb. I said, "Oh, it's funny you say that, because when I first pitched the movie, I said it would be like Life is Sweet, but with zombies and killing." And Mike Leigh said, "Well, it certainly had that," and walked off. And I was like, "Oh God!" And I was like, and I think maybe I'm reading too much into it. But whenever I see Mike Leigh, which I've seen him a number of times since, I'm always kind of still smarting, and just I remain a huge fan.
Yeah. But I think that's the brilliance of the film is the mix of sort of genres, because you feel that reality, but you're not. I don't know. There's sort of an effortless to it. It's almost like you're making a documentary about these people that go down the pub usually every evening, just regular people. And I mean, how do you come up with those wonderful shots? I mean, there's a long tracking shot at the beginning where Simon goes to the local supermarket to get something and goes back. And then you repeat that shot later. And all the background's the same, but it's more ominous, because everybody is now sort of changed. And he goes in the store and it's like totally different. There's blood on the thing, but he doesn't even notice it. It's quite brilliant. I'm kind of interested, because you were saying earlier about, some actors will do take one and some actors will take a dozen takes before they're really on it. But you don't have that option doing shots like that, do you? Everything's got to work.
Funnily enough, a couple of funny things about that shot. is that number one is it was the first day of the shoot that we did those 2 shots. And it's something that I've kind of continued to do in my career, is starting with something really difficult and something that involves the whole
Wow.
crew. Because when you do a one like that, every single person on the crew is really part of something. And because it's a one, like everybody's involved and everybody's really invested in it. And there's a couple of things about that shot. Number one is actually that I remember that it was in the script and we had the idea that we'd repeat this shot and that you'd see the normal everyday version and then you see the zombie apocalypse version. And it would be the same shot. He'd walk across the street in the same way. We had to really work to find the 2 locations. Me and Marcus Rowland, my production designer, still to this day, he just did The Running Man with me as well. We were out in Crouch End finding the right corner shop and the Sean's house and how long that walk was. And I remember when we did the tech recce, David Dunlap, the DP, he said to me at the tech recce, and he says that he didn't say this, but he did. he said, this shot's going to be cut out of the movie. And I said,
Whoa.
why do you say that? And he said, this is just shoe leather. This is exactly the kind of shot that gets cut out of a movie. You'll never use the whole of this in the edit. And when he said that to me, I was so kind of convinced that like it was a good idea that we went back to the location after the tech scout, and me and Marcus Rowland and Simon Pegg went back, and we basically, all of the detail in that shot, we kind of like tripled it. So almost the idea was like throwing down the gauntlet, is that we're going to make this shot so detailed that you can't cut it out, you know? So we worked really hard on it. And then it was the first day of the shoot. And the Steadicam operator was Paul Edwards, who did an amazing job. And the other funny thing about shooting it first is we shot the second version first. So we shot the zombie apocalypse version first because it was easier for art department to dress it all as trashed. And it was easier for the zombies to be in their makeup and get cleaned up than the other way around. So if you watch the movie, you have to know that the first time you see it, when Sean is walking across the street and everything's normal, was shot second. And it was the first day of the shoot. And we were shooting in Crouch End on a Sunday, and we had road closures. Actually, maybe we didn't have a full road closure. We had ITC, which means when, you can just stop cars for intermittent. But some takes, I think probably then, I said probably the max we did was maybe like 8 takes of both. But sometimes you do a take, because as you know, maybe people on the listening don't know that in the UK, at least, you can't stop anybody from walking through. And like PAs can ask people nicely not to walk through, but you can't physically stop anybody. It's against the law to manhandle anybody. So there was like one take where Simon got all the way to the store, and then he's on his way back, and right at the very end, like a drunk guy walks through and goes, "Fuck your film!"
Oh no!
And just like walk right through the shot of the last moment, and you just got to like you nearly got it 75% of the way through.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was the first day of the shoot, which is sort of crazy. And I've done similar things in later films, like. There's a shot in Baby Driver, which is a big Steadicam shot that goes all the way through the opening credits. And that was also the first day of the shoot. I always think it's a good thing to start with something pretty complicated that involves the entire crew.
Wow.
And when you were prepping Shaun of the Dead, did you do storyboards? Everything seems so precise. Did you storyboard the entire film?
Yeah, when I was doing TV, I would only do like little thumbnails, usually just for me. I would sort of thumbnail in the margin of the script and then write up a shot list. I storyboarded the whole thing, and it was really just to have a plan. It was to basically to come to work with a plan. And on the first film, on Shaun of the Dead, I thumbnailed the entire thing, and then I split the storyboards with my brother, actually. I did half of them and he did the other half. So we had storyboarded the entire thing, including dialogue. It wasn't just action and special effects stuff. It was the whole thing. And really, just if you're making a low budget movie, if you've made some decisions on the page, you're saving yourself time and money, because, you know, you can say in a location, hey, we're only looking this way. We're not going to look over there. This is the shot. We're going to look that way and that way. So just, I guess, just trying to be as prepared as possible, because it was an ambitious film for the money and the time. And the only way to get through something like that was just to prep, you know?
Also, it's interesting, how much was the storyboarding integrated with writing the script? Because you're really known for doing like the kind of tracking shots we were talking about, but then viciously fast montages or jump cuts from one place to another, where you could imagine in a script that might be a couple of pages, but actually you're getting through the action very quickly in very specific small shots.
Yeah, we don't usually write too much camera direction into the script because it makes it a tough read. But usually, I think even with some of those little fast insert montages, we might write a line where the different verbs are in caps. And actually, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I don't know how you do this on shoots, Roger, but I mean, on a low budget film, it's that thing. Inserts are always the things that fall off the end of the day. And if on a low budget film, you don't have necessarily a second unit to do inserts, but on Shaun, I would really be fighting all the time to get these little inserts, because I knew these were the transition points that would really help. And by the end of the shoot, what we started to do to kind of just get these shots is we would have an A and B camera, and we would stagger B camera by an hour. And basically, I would work through lunch, and I would be that sort of B camera would have a different lunch. And then over lunch, I would like basically shoot like 3 close-ups. And then maybe after we wrap, I'd stay with B camera for another hour and do like another 3 close-ups. So then, you know, by the end of the day, you've got another 6 setups. And they're always the things that like people say, oh, is it really important to have this brake pedal shot? Is it really important to have this shot of this button being pushed? And I'd be like, it really is important, or it's really important to me, because this is sort of the whole style of the thing. And it continues to be, something on all of the movies I do. It's always something that like, there's always so many inserts to do, and you gotta get them because they're good transition points and stuff. But they would usually be in the story. I used to be thinking about storyboards whilst I was writing, but not a lot of camera movement was ever written into the script, because you want to make the script the easiest read possible for people. So we sort of tried to get a set. We might mention something like this in the scene where he walks to the shops. It might say in one continuous shot, Shaun walks, but I wouldn't put too much. It would be, here's the script and here's the storyboards. And I mean, the other thing I really believe in, which not all directors do, is I like to be totally and utterly transparent with the crew in terms of give everybody as much information as they could possibly want. And so the storyboards are on the sides every day. Everybody knows what we're doing. Even if there are changes to the storyboards or something goes wrong, we have to sort of pivot. At least there's a daily plan. But I think all of that came from having had the experience on the low budget movie of not really having a very strong plan, and at the end of the day, not having enough coverage to cut it together in a sharp way, you know.
That served you well.
Yeah. How much on Shaun of the Dead was actually, how much changed during the shooting? I'm always interested. It's because, like, you know, Joel and Ethan really very, very religiously storyboard their films, but sometimes things do change, but not often.
Not a lot. I mean, I guess sometimes there might be, I mean, maybe there's something, actually there are some times where there are some things, especially on a film like that, where I remember there was one scene with Penelope Wilton and Bill Nighy where we were running out of time. Like the sun was going down. Even though we were in an interior, we were still using the light coming through the windows, and we were basically running out of time. And so I just pivoted and said, I was like, oh, we'll just do like a like Ingmar Bergman type shots. Just like, let's just shoot this through a doorway, just like, so you kind of pivot to something that's not normally something that I would do. And actually, I have to say that the scene works better for it, because I sort of broke out of normal coverage and just thought, well, let's just shoot like a master wide, and it's creeping in, and it's like, it's the whole scene is in like one shot. And that's obviously the things, especially in a low budget film, where like the plan goes out the window, and like, I mean, on any film, the sun is, I always say, people say, what's the difference between a low budget film and a big budget film? I said, not that much, because the sun is always coming up or going down.
That's right.
That would be the changes. It's like, the changes would usually be, we're a couple of days over, we have to simplify this action scene, or we're running out of time on this day. How can we get through this scene in less shots, less setups, So sometimes if you notice that suddenly the coverage changes into kind of like a stylish master, that's because the clock was ticking.
Well, I think also doing all of that prep ahead of time and the storyboards makes you realize what it is you want from the scene, because you're going through it and okay, we'll do this and this because it'll show that. And then if you get on set and you have to improvise, you have all of that prep that you've done before, and you know what the scene is so well that you can say, wait, we could do the same thing if we do that or whatever. But if you don't do the prep and then try and figure it out on the day, you don't get the transitions, you don't get the inserts, you don't get the stuff that gives the style.
And also, and this is, sometimes this works with some actors more than others, because some actors would like to feel the whole thing. But then some actors are sort of, will be able to adapt more in terms of that you be able to shoot parts of a scene because you don't need the whole thing. Like, we've already got this in the master, we've already got this in the wide. This you could be really specific, say this shot is just for this moment. Like, so, you get through some semblance of a master wide, and then going through the coverage, and then getting down to kind of just like granular stuff. So you're kind of always shooting with the edit in mind. And sometimes that doesn't always work, because some actors are better when they have the chance to do the whole thing. And I guess, I feel as a director, you're always strategizing how to make the shooting of the scene work for actors who work in different ways. And in terms of the order you shoot them, or which people are totally fine, like picking up just for these 2 lines, or which people would rather do the whole thing,
So you would often try and do that, just if you just needed 2 lines and a close-up, you would try and just do that section?
I think if it was something specific, yeah, like it, or rather you could say to an actor, hey, we're going to do this bit, but this shot is really for this line, like, and some actors, like Simon is really great at that. Like he's really technical, and you could tell him that and it wouldn't throw him. Other people don't really want to know like what the camera is doing necessarily, or don't want or need to be part of that. When I think about, I start to kind of think over the years about the difference between actors and movie stars is actors disappear and movie stars know where the camera is. I don't mean that anything, I'm not saying that anyone is better than the other, because obviously some of the best actors in the world, like Daniel Day-Lewis, will completely disappear into the scene, and then you have to capture that. And then there's other actors who are more technical. It's almost like a Marlene Dietrich thing, is like, she knows where her light is, and she knows where to stand to hit that light. And she's part of the process, because she's going to stand at exactly the point where she knows she's going to look great. And so that's like a movie star thing. And I love working with both, because you sort of have to change your strategy of how to shoot people, sometimes within the same scene. Like there was one film that I was doing with Bill Pope, when we did The World's End, the third one with Simon and Nick. A lot of the scenes around the table, like tables in bars, and people would be sitting around, 5 actors sitting across from each other. And as I'm sure, like, Roger, you can probably explain this better than I, but like it's some people kind of like groan whenever like it's a dinner table scene just because of
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah.
just because
Oh,
of
yeah.
how many angles you need and how much coverage you need, and you need
Yes.
you need all the eye lines and
Eye lines.
Yeah.
The endless discussion about where are you cutting from where to where because of the eye lines.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then on top of that, in that particular film, you had 5 different actors who were all brilliant comic actors, but they would have, me and Bill would start to have a plan of who to shoot first. And it would be like this thing of like, okay, like Paddy Considine and Nick Frost, you should shoot them first because they come into the scene with a lot of energy and they're sort of like their first 4 takes are the ones. Eddie Marzan is kind of like sort of somewhere in the middle. And Mind Freeman and Simon Pegg are like the Duracell bunnies and you can just go and go and go. But the thing is, and also because Simon was my co-writer, when you do a couple of days in a row where Simon would be the last to shoot, he then starts to get wise to it. And maybe like, I think at the end of the day, he came up to me and Bill, he said, I have a request. And I was like, can I go first tomorrow? So he would totally be on. He would totally be on to us in terms of like, oh, I see what's happening. There's an order of the way you were shooting. But so it is that thing where it's really difficult because so much of it, especially with comedy, is about capturing lightning in a bottle and trying to get the take before the scene has been tired out. You know?
Yeah. But also, so much of your comedy is done with the camera. It's like the repeated action, or it's done in the script, like the repeated dialogue, and it's it must require a lot of thought to get that specific. I mean, how long did it take you and Simon to write Shaun of the Dead?
Shaun, I think I feel like we wrote it over the summer after the second series of Spaced. So probably about the first draft, maybe like 3 months or something like that. But that's just the first draft. And then, you know, I think between finishing the first draft and actually making the film was nearly 2 years, or maybe at least a year and a half. Like we went through like a long process of developing it, and Film 4, who were originally financing the film, sort of briefly went like bust around that time and sort of ceased being, you know, like an entity. So we had to go, after being with them for like nearly 2 years, we then had to go around sort of cap in hand to other companies. And Eric Fellner, like Working Title, sort of came to the rescue. You know, it's like Rachel Pryor and Natasha Warner, Working Title, had sort of recommended it to Eric and sort of said, Tina and Eric, and said, you have to make this film. So, and, you know, lots of other people had said no. So there was that, you know, and obviously having come from a TV background where there were obviously lots of TV gigs for me and Simon, but it wasn't like anybody from the film world was knocking on our door. We had to create the film ourselves. And so that process, it's probably, I guess over time, we then did subsequent drafts, but from the starting to write the film to making it was like, you know, like a 2-year period, pretty much.
Was it easy then to get finance for Hot Fuzz and World's End?
Yeah, it definitely. Yes. I mean, on Hot Fuzz for sure. I think in that one, the film had done really well internationally as well as the UK. And so Hot Fuzz was probably like cost 3 times as much as Shaun, and was a much more ambitious film just in terms of the amount of cast and the locations and the shooting days. Like, so it was a more ambitious script as well. Like, it took longer to write. But yeah, I mean, I think because it was the same team, Working Title and Universal, and almost entirely the same crew. So that was, I won't say it was easy, it was ambitious, but like it came together very quickly. I think anything else where you're making something on a bigger budget, there's much more of a process of getting to a green light stage, of like a number of things have to come together to get the go ahead. And to this day, it's like that, because it's not just about the script, it's about who's in it, where it's going to film, like what's the tax break. Obviously, when things go up in budget, there's more of those kind of hoops to jump through, you know.
So why did you set it in your hometown, Wales? Hot Fuzz, that is.
Well, it was sort of, I guess, because I'm a West Country boy, I guess it was just I'll tell you what it was, is one of the inspirations was when I was a film fan as a teenager, there was my kind of Wales, at least to me, I mean, I love it now, and it's a beautiful place, part of the country. But, as a teenager, it's boring. You want to get out of there.
Yeah, you want to get out.
You want to get out,
right.
because it's like, you want to get to London, you want to get to a big city like Bristol or London or somewhere else. But so at the time, it was seemed kind of very sort of quiet and slow. And I think I used to watch a lot of cop films like Bullet or Dirty Harry. And something like Dirty Harry or the San Francisco set sort of cop films would feel so alien to me watching them, coming from like sort of small town England, watching these big city cop films. There's sort of the idea of like, well, what if you took like a Hollywood action film and put it into the English countryside? Because obviously on TV, they were like, with some exceptions, there was the sort of sleepier image of the, kind of the local bobbies, whether that would be something like Dixon of Dock Green in kind of London.
Dock Green, yeah, I was going to say. Or
later something like Heartbeat, which is kind of about, like a country copper. And so we just kind of thought, like, well, what if Tony Scott made a film in Somerset? What would that look like? What would that be like? And then really the idea, it came of like a big city cop going to the country and being paired with his partner who's obsessed with cop films. But obviously for both of them, that reality doesn't exist. Like what's in the movies doesn't exist to either the London sort of like by the book cop or the sort of the, kind of yokel like Somerset cop. So then what about if something really big landed on there and it started to erupt into like a big Michael Bay, Tony Scott, Jerry Bruckheimer cop film in Somerset? That was basically the idea. And it was so much fun. And also then putting veteran British actors into that. And usually actors that we picked had usually been in some big genre film and usually in some big Hollywood film. So it was very deliberate that we had Timothy Dalton, who was Bond, or Paul Freeman, who was in Raiders of the Lost Ark, or Stuart Wilson, who's in, Lethal Weapon 3, or Billy Wilder, who was in The Omen. And, so we really deliberately picked these actors they're all British actors, but they all had some other life on screen. And just the idea of having this
Olivia Colman as well. Olivia Colman, like I'd never seen her before or since. But
I think her first movie, in fact.
Was it?
Really?
Yes. And also the other thing that came out of that, so Olivia, we'd seen her be brilliant on TV in, shows like Peep Show. On the set of Hot Fuzz, she met Paddy Considine, who was developing the short, which would eventually become Tyrannosaur. And, he is the person who saw the dramatic actress in Olivia, because he met her on Hot Fuzz and he said, "Hey, I've written something. I'd love you to be in it." And she said this in many interviews. It was kind of the start of her other career as a dramatic actress.
Oh, wow.
And, you have to give credit to Paddy as the one who kind of like had the foresight to see that Olivia could be more than just a great comedy actress,
Yeah.
But we're in such an amazing cast on that film. It's so just...
Yeah. How do you manage to get such a great cast when, you couldn't have had forever to shoot the film. So to have them all within the schedule that you had to shoot.
I think most of the people we shot in London, and then I think we shot in Somerset. We shot in London on location. We didn't do any stage work on that one really, but we shot on London locations and some sets on locations. And then I think we were in Somerset for like 6 weeks. And I think pretty much most of the cast were down there because in most of those scenes, that they're all in it together. It's only really a couple of actors, like there's the bookending scenes with Bill Nighy and Martin Freeman and Steve Coogan. They probably only shot for 2 days, but I think pretty much everybody else was around for most of the shoot. And so it would be quite a scene in the Swan Hotel in Wales, because we'd be doing night shoots, and then we'd go into the hotel bar, and there'd be Billy Whitelaw, Stuart Wilson, Timothy Dalton, Peter White, Jim Broadbent, like all propping up the bar at like 5 a.m. after a night shoot. It was wild. It was funny.
It must have been a lot of fun. Was it always your intention to make the 3 films and finish it with World's End?
No, really. We didn't have a plan beyond Shaun. Like Hot Fuzz was the next thing that came up, but that didn't start to come together until Shaun of the Dead was out. And then because we'd done 2, we wanted to do a 3rd one, but we didn't want to do a sequel to either of them. We wanted to do like a spiritual. We wanted to sort of make the 3 of them like spiritual sequels to each other, because I think because they take so long to make, the idea of doing the same subject matter twice was not that interesting. Like, didn't want to do, and it's probably one of the things very early on, was probably one of the smartest decisions is, when we made Shaun of the Dead, the first question is like, do you want to do Shaun of the Dead 2? And we were like, no, we don't. We want to do something. We want to do something different. We've just done it. We've got nothing left to say about zombies.
So then you make a film about a pub crawl. Is this taken from life?
It actually was. I think it's funny. I think because of those 3 films, people assume that I love pubs, but in truth, I think there was a big part of my teenage years in Somerset. But then when I came to London, I sort of came to London to escape all that. And in a way, it's just part of my upbringing, especially in those small towns. I mean, the World's End thing, the thing about the pub crawl in the town was absolutely something that existed in Wales, and something I disastrously attempted once and didn't do very well. And so I think that failure has kind of like hung over me for a long time. So I guess making the movie was an attempt to exercise that.
Yeah. It's very funny. I mean, it does feel kind of quite close to home for me too.
I mean, the funniest thing about doing those 3 films, and I think the thing that we were all proudest of, not just me and Simon, but the whole crew, is that they traveled internationally. And the thing that was really amazing about that is we don't make any attempt to make it like transatlantic. In fact, they're kind of about as British as they could possibly be. And I think it was something that was really encouraging to us, that Shaun, which is very British, had played in other countries, and it cracked the top 10 in the States, which is kind of wild that like a film shot in Crouch End was, in American cinemas on thousands of screens, and people got it. And like that definitely emboldened us to make Hot Fuzz and The World's End, and not try and tone it down or make it any less British. The Britishness of it was the selling point, and in other countries with Hot Fuzz, people would say, hey, have you seen that British cop movie? Like that would be the raison d'etre. That would be the selling point. And so I'm very proud with those 3 movies that we didn't tone them down, and we made them true to our experiences. And you can be universal in your specificity. If you're more specific, you actually resonate with more people than when you try to appeal to everybody and end up appealing to nobody.
Right. Yeah. That's really true.
Yeah. Has it been very different? I mean, then you basically started shooting films in America, I think in Baby Driver and Scott Pilgrim. Was it very different working in America?
Yes and no. Like Scott Pilgrim was the first one, and that was in Toronto, or Toronto as the Canadians say, Toronto. You got to drop the second T. Here was the good thing with that. Is that it was a big studio movie. Universal had financed essentially Sean and Hot Fuzz. So it wasn't a completely new relationship, but it was a much bigger budget and much more pressure. But I was able to bring a lot of my crew with me. So there were a lot of people working on that film who had worked on Sean and Hot Fuzz. And I think that was really important because I think I was able to kind of like protect my identity in a way and the style by having, collaborators across the board. There were new people though, is that Bill Pope, that was the first time I worked with Bill. And that was an amazing experience because, you're doing your first Hollywood film and it's an action film and it's a comedy film. And Bill has, shot some of the best comedies and best action films of the last like 30 years. So, and because the film was ambitious and it was a little bit different, and even though the studio brought it to me as a piece of material, I don't think anybody quite really understood exactly what it was. And in a way, like having somebody like Bill on board, it reassures them. It's like, oh, they've got the cinematographer of The Matrix. Great. Okay. We're starting to understand what this might be like, So it is really, there are things in terms of making your first Hollywood film, just ways of protecting yourself in a way of just having major HODs that will put the studio's mind at rest. And also just working with new people. That was the first time I worked with the very sadly departed Brad Allen, who's an amazing stunt choreographer and coordinator who's sadly no longer with us, but I did 2 films with him and Scott Pilgrim was the first. And he was recommended to me through Guillermo del Toro, and Bill obviously was the first time working with him. And so that was great. And Baby Driver was a similar thing where it was a mix of people I'd worked with before and people who were sort of the top people in their field. On Baby Driver, Darren Prescott was the stunt coordinator and second unit director. And, he's amazing at shooting car chases. Great choreographer. Ryan Heffington did Baby Driver. So, and also actors as well. It's just like kind of both expanding the people that you work with on an international level, but also there are key collaborators, editor, producer Naira Park, like production designer, my brother working on sort of concept design and storyboards. There are a number of people who've kind of been over all of the movies, which has been great for me and really important in terms of just being able to sort of, when you're making films at studios, I think it would be really tough as a British director to go to Hollywood solo and sort of like do a big movie and not have anybody that you've worked with before. That's tough. And I know people who've done that with their first studio movie and had a tough time. And I was always really kind of wanted to be loyal to the people that I come up with. And also because we all had a shorthand in a way of working together, which, and to the new film that we're literally just mixing and grading as we speak in Soho is, lots of people I've worked with for 20, 30 years,
To talk about, Baby Driver, you tried something different again. You're always doing different things. In the kind of combination of the music with the, was that always your intent with a script, with a project?
With that one, yes. There have been sequences in space, and it's particularly in Shaun of the Dead. In Shaun of the Dead, there's the scene where they're fighting the zombie set to Queen. And it was the first time that I'd done something where I'd done action and dance choreography at the same time.
But it felt like you were influenced by Clockwork Orange.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no.
No. I love that film. I love also, I don't think Stanley Kubrick quite gets enough credit for his music selections in his movies, actually, because I think in probably my favorite film of all time, 2001, that is a film where like the soundtrack is synonymous with the movie, and yet they're all needle drops in the edit. They, in fact, they threw out the score by Alex North and stuck to the temp music of all these, the classical pieces that they edited to and they came to love. And And Clockwork Orange obviously has a really great kind of like diverse kind of like soundtrack. But I mean, I always love that in film. I mean, Martin Scorsese is obviously another master of marrying songs with visuals. Quentin Tarantino as well. Like, I love that in film. And I think as I'd done it in Shaun, I'd already had the idea for Baby Driver. And in fact, I'd already shot a music video in 2002, or like 15 years before Baby Driver, which is sort of like the first scene of Baby Driver as a music video. And I'd had this idea in the back of my mind. And really what it was like creating a story where every single scene would be set to music, because the main character had to listen to music to function. You know, he used music as like his pulse, essentially. And so the writing of that film, it's actually the only screenplay that I've written solo. Everything else I've written has been co-written. But with that one, I sort of really had to figure out a way to explain on the page how it was going to work and how the scenes would be married to the songs. And it's a tough thing to write down because it's a much easier thing to kind of like show it. But yeah, that was another film where it's very much designed because a lot of sequences are set to the song. So you have to kind of like time it all out before and rehearse it with a choreographer and then with the crew. And, you know, you could edit the storyboards like an animatic to the music, but then you would also have to make it work in the real world, because as I'm sure you know, is that animatics don't necessarily always comply to kind of real world physics, and timing. And in fact, yeah. I have to say, Bill Pope questioned me on one sequence, and he was 100% right. One of the car chases I edited to this song by The Damned, Neat, Neat, Neat. And Bill watched the animatic, and he said, in that very sort of great Bill way where he just kind of cut straight to it, the honest truth. He said, you're going to run out of song. And I said, what do you mean? He said, yes, the stunts that you've edited together are going to take longer to play out in real life than how you've edited them. You've edited them too quickly. The actual stunts are going to take longer than that, and you're going to want to hold on them longer. So you're going to need a second song because you're going to run out of song. And I sort of said, oh, you know what? I think we'll be okay. And of course he was right. And as soon as we started editing it, he was absolutely right. It's like the song runs, you know, if you want to hold on these stunts longer, we're going to run out of songs. So to solve that issue, and it's in the finished movie, I suddenly had this idea, and, you know, especially doing inserts at the end of the shoot, where you do all your little pickup inserts. I thought, I know what we should do is that we should start the song again, or he should rewind the song, because in the scene, he's driving to this song and then everything goes haywire and the plan goes completely out the window and they have to take a detour. They get stuck in a traffic jam. They have to carjack another car. So their smart plan of timing out this getaway to the song has gone wrong. And so this wasn't in the script and it wasn't in the storyboards, but on the last day of the shoot, I think it was Ansel's hand double. I think Ansel had actually rapped and it was his hand double. I said, get a shot of him rewinding the song. So he gets in, so they carjack this other car, gets in, he plugs his iPod in, and he just rewinds it to the right point in the song, and then he continues. So basically, we solved the Bill Pope issue by just like, well, let's just rewind, because he's got to get back in sync himself, so will we. And that's exactly what happens in the movie. But it's that thing, there's those things that you don't think about until you're forced to, and, you know, this is why it's great to have, you know, collaborators who've done, you know, like 4 times the films that you have, because they've got like hard-won knowledge where they'll say, hey, this isn't going to work, and I'm going to tell you why. And, you know, so all of those things, just that collaboration of like, you know, you end up, it's that thing that I was saying, like, with when I was doing TV and like French and Saunders, and I was essentially learning on the job. You know, I feel like 30 years later, I'm still learning on the job. I still like, you learn something on every film, and you're still kind of finding out the ways to do things. And sometimes it's sort of like it's a joyous experience, and sometimes it's like you know, a hard lesson, you know.
But we haven't had the option of seeing your new film. What do you want to tell us about it?
It's another very ambitious one. I mean, it's based on the Stephen King book, The Running Man, which was previously adapted in the 80s with Arnold Schwarzenegger. But actually, that film in 1987 was a very loose adaptation of the Stephen King book. And I had read the Stephen King book when I was a teenager. So I was very aware that the film had not really adapted the book at all. And so it was something I always thought, like, I wouldn't even call it a remake. I would call it a new adaptation. I was thinking, oh, that would make a good remake because there's so much material that's just not in the original film. And then it actually came to me. It was one of the sort of joyous, a gift where actually the film that you want to make comes into your inbox. And Simon Kinberg, the producer, got in touch with me and said, is it true that you have interest in making The Running Man? And I said, actually, I do. And this was I think it was 2021, just after Last Night in Soho came out. And so we started filming. It comes out in mid-November. We only started filming it like 11 months ago. And it's, along with Scott Pilgrim, it's actually the longest shoot I've ever done. And in this movie, basically the premise is that Glenn Powell plays like an out-of-work dad who sort of, in desperation, ends up on a deadly game show where you have to survive 30 days out in the wild with everybody trying to kill you. And in the 80s film, they didn't do the part where he goes out into the world. They sort of kept it contained in like an arena. But in our movie, he does go out into the world. So it's kind of like the world's deadliest game of hide and seek. And as such, the complicated aspect of it is it's sort of like a road movie in that we're out on location. He's in lots of different locations. I think my production designer, the same one from Shaun of the Dead, no less, Marcus Rayland, said that by the end of the shoot, with different sets and locations, there were 170 different locations.
Wow.
Some of them are sets. Some of them are like doing 3 locations in one day. But we were the toughest part of it. And the thing that I think hopefully makes the film look pretty ambitious, but is also the hardest thing to do, was just, like the film is like a traveling circus where we're changing locations most days. And so you don't often get the luxury of really being in one set for too long. And sometimes you'll be in one set for just one night. And in the finished film, hopefully when you see it, if you see it you'll see that it feels like you really go on a journey with the character, because he travels between different cities and he's on the run and he's hiding out. And it's a really expansive journey, but it made it very difficult to shoot. And great crew, great cast, just like a marathon, just like a physical marathon. And I sort of said to Glenn Powell, I said, you got into the best shape of your life and I got into my worst. Just like stress eating, too much coffee, not enough sleep, stress eating, just a physical wreck by the end of the shoot. I feel better. I feel better now.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing it. I'm sure it's very different.
Yeah.
There was,
But you didn't set it in Somerset, did you?
No. We shot in 3 different countries though, because it's set in the States, but like for, as many films, we shot in the UK, but we shot in London and we shot in Glasgow, and then we ended the whole shoot in Bulgaria, in Sofia, because we were using London and Glasgow for more urban environments. And then in the book, he goes out into the country, and Bulgaria was sort of like a better match for the States than, English countryside doesn't really look like the States.
Not really.
No, but they, and also they had kind of like long freeways that you could close down, and lots of road closures, which were a lot easier. And actually, I think, the cinematographer on this one was Chung Chung-hoon, who, we met him, who I've now done 2 films with. And it was really, it was a real adventure, and I'm really happy with it. But it was definitely hard, because you were sort of kind of like charging through different action, like set pieces, and a lot of coverage, a lot of inserts, just like, and a lot of turnover of locations and sets on almost a daily basis, which is, you know, starts to kind of just get tiring after a while, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We want to ask you about
the documentary you did on the Sparks
brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Which we saw the other night.
Where did that come from? I wasn't actually aware of the Sparks brothers till we watched it. I go, wow, yeah.
Well, I was, I'd never done a documentary before, and I was a Sparks fan. I remember them because they're an American band, but obviously they've been around since the 70s. And I remember seeing them on Top of the Pops when I was about 5 or 6 and being really struck by their onstage persona. And I actually had one of their songs on vinyl, Beat the Clock, from 1979. And over the years, I was always just amazed that they, unlike a lot of bands, they just kept going and creating new music. And I think it was around the time of like, maybe about 10 years ago, in fact, actually, I saw them for the first time in Los Angeles, and they'd done this album with Franz Ferdinand. And I saw them live, and I sort of regretted not having seen them before, because I just was like, how is this band who like I've known since the 70s, like still creating new material and still innovating, and just a lot of bands when they get to like their second or third decade start to become their own like legacy tribute act, and Sparks have just kind of kept releasing new material. And I got to meet them in LA because they found out I was a fan. I met them in Los Angeles, and like you see in the documentary, they are exactly who they are in the documentary. They're extremely charming and funny. And after Baby Driver, I started to say to my friends, I remember actually the director, Phil Lord, I took him to a Sparks gig because he liked them as well. And I took him to a gig. And I remember before the show started, I said, somebody should do a documentary about Sparks. They're like the most influential band and the most interesting band. And there are so many bands that I've seen have feature documentaries that are half as interesting as Sparks. And Phil just said, you should do the documentary. So I maybe because Phil goaded me into it, I said, okay, I will. And that night I said to them, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And the next day I called them and said, would you be interested? And I'd never done a documentary before, I think because I was just really passionate about the subject. And it was just doing a documentary about something you love and about music and a band that you love. It was just a pure pleasure doing that. It was very different to doing a narrative feature, because obviously there's still the challenges of getting everything and completing, but you know, you're following the band around and you're like shooting their gigs and talking to people they've worked with over the years. And I actually did all the interviews as well. So I interviewed like 80 people for the documentary, and I loved it. And I mean, I'd like to do another one, but I feel like I was spoiled by Ron and Russell, because Sparks are exactly who you would want them to be. And, you know, it was the rare case of do meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Watching the documentary, then I remembered them because I remembered seeing them on Top of the Pops and that, but they'd never stayed in my mind as a band. But I say, watching it was really. How long did you spend with them? They seemed so comfortable with you. That was really interesting.
I think that's because I had got to know them and knew them. I think that was sort of the reason I did it, is because I'd come to know them, and I think they turned down other documentary offers in the past, but because they knew me and they liked my films, they felt comfortable about it. And I guess it was between Baby Driver and Last Night in Soho. So I think I probably shot, not consecutively, but probably like for about 9 months. We did stuff, but not full time. We would sort of do a bunch of interviews, and then they'd have some more touring. So I kind of went to like 3-4 different countries with them. I shot in London, the States, Japan, and Mexico. And then in and around that, we would kind of, when we'd be in different cities, we'd do like an LA day or a New York day, or more than a few days in London, and then interviewed a couple of people. I don't think we did any in Japan or Mexico. We just followed them around, but it was great. I really enjoyed doing it, and I would happily do it again if I could. If I found I mean, with a documentary, it's the same as making a movie. You have to be genuinely passionate about the subject matter because it's going to be years of your life doing it, you know?
But it's also fun because it's different. I mean, you had the little animated pieces to explain things, you know, it was really interesting.
Yeah. That's really great.
Yeah.
It's really good. I look forward to seeing another one.
I loved doing it. And I've been looking for like another documentary subject. It's also like a nice thing to do in between films. It was using a different muscle. And I actually because of the pandemic, I ended up editing Soho and Sparks at the same time. So there was a really crazy day. I think right at the end of 2020, I did the tech check on both movies on the same day. And caught COVID that day as well.
My God!
No. Oh no!
It was
you didn't ever get the two films mixed up though.
No, but they both got a lot of music in them. So it was a two wildly different movies. But it was it's kind of fun. I mean, you don't often get the chance to do it, and I see why some directors, you know, Martin Scorsese always seems to be like doing, you know, a narrative feature and two documentaries at the same time. And I can see why, because I think it was an interesting thing to me. I'm usually like terrible at multitasking, and I think doing Sparks before and after Soho was actually a really great way of dealing with both films in a way. And actually, funny enough, the last bit of filming on the Sparks brothers was whilst we were making the movie, they were developing a film with Leos Carax, which became a net, but it wasn't happening. And then after we shot Soho, the net film was happening. So I said to the producer, we have to go to Brussels and shoot just for one day on the set of this film, because it's a great like end to the movie, which we probably didn't have that. So, you know, the great thing with documentaries is it's reasonably fluid in terms of that you can kind of react to things that are developing, you know?
Well, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, great. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
Covered a lot.
I'm a fan of the show. I've heard some of my previous collaborators on here as well, so it's always super fun. You interviewed Bill and Christy, and so it's really nice to sort of like.
Yeah.
I'm such a fan. I'm such a fan of your work as well.
Thank you.
It's true,
and it's wonderful how you approach all these different things so differently. When we go to see one of your movies, we don't know what we're going to see.
Yeah, right.
And I mean that in a good way.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the way that they say that you've got to approach films is that you have to, as a director, with each film, have to go into something with some fear of the unknown. You have to do something that you haven't done before, because otherwise you just get complacent. So there is that thing where people say, there has to be one thing in every movie that terrifies you. So I guess that's the thing. You've always got to look for something that's like you've never done before, or you don't really know how to do it, and you're learning as you do. So, which is nerve-wracking, but keeps you feeling alive and stressed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this. This has been great.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. It's lovely to be on.
If you'd like to sponsor the Team Deakins podcast, let us know at pod@teamdeakins.com. Thanks for listening. If you want more information and further discussion, check out the forums at www.rogerdeakins.com. Becoming a member is free, and you can ask follow-up questions there. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast for more new questions and topics. Also, check us out on Instagram at team.deakins. See you next time.